Hello, everyone. Welcome to PrimeTalk, a conversation platform from ET Prime. I'm Debleena Majumdar, education and M&A consultant at ET Prime. One of my favorite quotes on the future of work by philosopher Marshall McLuhan says, "The future of work consists of learning for a living." And that highlights just how important skills and learning are for earning. Well, today we are here to talk about the jobs of 2030 and their link with the skills to match. Joining me are two brilliant people who have been living this journey. Please welcome Leslie Shannon, Head of Ecosystem and Trend Scouting at Nokia, who will decode the emerging technologies from 5G to metaverse and help us understand what that means for skills and jobs. Welcome, Leslie.
Thank you.
Yes, and please welcome Manish Sabharwal, Vice Chairman, TeamLease, co-founder, India Life, member of several advisory boards, columnist with Indian Express, and former independent director at RBI, whose thoughts on skillings have been an inspiration for millions. Welcome, Manish.
Thanks, Debleena.
Great. So over the last few months, we at ET Prime have been working on a detailed report on these future jobs of 2030 with the hypothesis that many of these jobs would still be driven by software. And hence, what does it mean for the skills that we need to develop? And now, today, we are honored to release this report in your presence, A Hitchhiker's Guide to the Jobs Galaxy of 2030. So this report will be available for all our ET Prime members in our Thursday's edition. So with that, we'll get started with our conversation for today. A quick housekeeping note for all of us who have joined today. Please, we've kept the last 15 minutes of this talk for answering questions. We have received questions from registrations, and we also have live questions, which I'm sure you will be sending us through the chat window. So please send us your questions and we'll try to answer as many as we can during this talk. So let me start by asking both of you a question which came up as we were researching on our report. Historically, successive waves of technology and automation have been accompanied by fears around what this will mean for jobs. But we've made an hypothesis in our report that there could be three kinds of human-machine collaborations in the near future when it comes to job. First, people who are writing these algorithms. Second, those working with these algorithms. And third, the ones who are working for them. So I wanted to start by asking you, and maybe Manish, we can start with you first. What do you think this means for each person today who's looking at developing their skills for the emerging world, especially right now, it being the college admission season in India? I think many parents and students are asking this question. So let's start with you, Manish, and then maybe Leslie, you can also share your thoughts on this question as context.
I mean, see, there's no such thing as a technology company anymore. Every company is a technology company, and software is eating the world, as one famous venture capitalist said. So in India, from a career perspective, the IT industry will hire more people in the next 5 years than they did in the last 40. So it took us 40 years to get to 5 million sort of employment. We'll go to 10 million employment in terms of software. But if you want to think about outside software, right, what will be the kind of, how do you compete with software if your competitor is not somebody from another business school, it's an algorithm or it's a bot or it's stuff like that. I think humans will always have an unfair advantage at being humans. So I think we have to think about different kinds of intelligence. If I was telling my kids, I hope you develop three kinds of intelligence, right? Conversational intelligence. What you say does not matter as when you say it and how you say it and where you say it and in front of who you say it. When you get older, you realize that conversational intelligence is a form of intelligence. I don't think any algorithm will be able to figure that out. So I think a clear advantage that we have over machine learning is conversational intelligence. I think political intelligence, the ability to build teams, the ability to collaborate with people, the ability to work with people you don't like. Team and politicians work with people they don't like all the time. That will be an important 21st century skill for every human being, not just politicians. And I think the third, which is the most complex, you can call it strategic intelligence, but I call it serendipity intelligence. How do you improve your odds of being lucky? That's a probabilistic view of the world. That's a reflexive view of the world. It's a strategic view of the world, right? Strategy is the art of creating an unfair advantage. And I don't think So I think conversational intelligence, serendipity intelligence, political intelligence are only a few kinds of intelligence which I think we will always beat machines at. But I'd love to hear Leslie.
Yeah, Manish, your terrific points. I couldn't agree more. Really, the power of the future for us is really to double down on being human, because anything that is rules-based, a computer is going to be able to do. And that goes well beyond fields of technology, which is where I study. But anything that's rules-based, so the legal profession. You know, you've got the young man in the UK who, after he got a traffic ticket, he wrote a program to challenge traffic tickets, and he just put it up for free on the internet. And now millions of people have successfully challenged their traffic tickets in the UK and in the United States using this free program that he wrote, because the law is just a bunch of rules, and anything that is a bunch of rules is something that a computer can actually do. And that actually goes, I don't want to like scare anybody out there too much, but it actually goes for writing code itself. There's a company in San Francisco called OpenAI that has developed a program called Codex, that if you open Codex and you say, I think one of their examples is, build me a program in which there is a spaceship that is shooting at blue planets or something. Codex will then analyze that. And so this is natural language in, right? It will analyze that. It will determine what computer language is the best suited to actually build something like that. And then it just writes the code for it. So it's the mechanics of executing the code that is likely over the next, and this will be a very slow process, right? But over the next decade, over the next 2 decades, the actual mechanics of creating code, I think, will be more and more done by the actual machines themselves. What's going to be left, and what's going to be important for us to know how to do, is thinking of what we should tell the computers to do, which actually overlaps with your intelligences that you spoke about. Creativity and seeing and understanding the solutions that are needed for problems. That's actually where we excel, and where it's going to be very hard for machines to follow us.
Thank you so much for that context, Leslie. So that gives us 2 things to start off this webinar with. One is, like you mentioned, Leslie, that we need to double down on being human. And the other is, Manish, like you said, 3 kinds of intelligence: the strategic, the political, and the conversational. These will stand us in good stead. So with that, let's delve a little deeper. And Manish, this is a question for you. So I wanted to ask you, you've been speaking about this, that the skill development model, especially in our country, has to change, and we have to have more focus on apprentice programs. So my question to you is, even if this takes place, what kind of skills would that enable, and how sustainable would that be in the current economic and changing environment?
See, in the past, we had a very hard partition between education and employability. We had a hard partition between school and college. And I think those partitions were just in our cognitive minds. They were not in the world of work. They were not in the world of employers, right? I do think we understand you can't teach people in 3 months what they should have learned in 3 years, or they should have learned in 12 years. In fact, some of the most important skills are what you learn in college, right? In school, right? How to be curious, confident, risk taker, team player are not things you learn in college. They're things you learn in school. And that's why school sometimes, I think, matters more than skill. And in India, unlike China, where the farm to non-farm transition happened to factories, in India, the farm to non-farm transition is happening to services. So actually the wage premium is not a school premium, it's a school premium, it's not a skill premium, because that's what you learn in school. But I think the apprenticeship program that I keep talking about comes from a realization over the last 20 years of experimentation in India that any skill system will have to give us 5 things. It will have to give us learning by doing, because that's, soft skills are not taught, they are caught. And if you want to catch them, you have to be in a workplace. They don't catch them in a classroom. learning while learning in a poor country like India, kids can't pay for their education. And I'm not sure a debt-driven model is the right way for higher education, right? I mean, America's $1.5 trillion of student debt, half of it will have to be written off or is in the process of being written off. So learning while learning, learning by doing. I think learning with flexibility of delivery, an online classroom has to be equal to an on-job classroom, which has to be equal to an on-site classroom, which has to be equal to an on-campus classroom. Traditionally, we've had an apartheid. Everybody thinks a university looks like Oxford or Harvard or IIT or IIM, and that's just not true anymore. And you need to give full flexibility. I think with qualification modularity, a 3-month certificate has to become an opening balance for a 1-year diploma, for a 2-year advanced diploma, and a 3-year degree. Because you'll need multiple on-ramps and off-ramps if you think about it. And I think the last design principle is really signaling value. You know, I went to Wharton or IITs and IIMs are not good places. They're good places to be at, but they're better places to be from, right? The fundamental value of going to Harvard is being from Harvard, not at Harvard, right? So I think that if we think about skilling, I think the future is degree apprenticeships, you know, because the social signaling value of degrees tends to matter. But college isn't what it used to be. You know, 60% of taxi drivers in Korea now have a college degree. 31% of Walmart checkout clerks have a college degree. 15% of high-end security guards in India have a college degree because the world has produced more graduates in the last 40 years than the 800 years before that. So I think degree apprenticeships are the future of education. They combine learning with earning, with doing, with modularity, with flexibility and signaling value.
That's really insightful, Manish, and a lot to think about and unpack from that. Leslie, I think you've seen it from US and the global context. I wanted to check with you also that the emerging new technologies that you are tracking, whether it's metaverse or self-driving cars, in the context of what we've been talking about for skills, which of these do you think are really more sustainable? And where do you see this biggest shift needed in terms of skills that people need to align with?
Yeah, actually, I just wanted to comment quickly on what Manish just said. I'm in the United States right now, but I've lived for a long time in Finland, and the difference between the approach to education in those two countries is stark. You know, America does have this debt-driven model that is terrible. It's terrible. And, you know, people coming out of school, actually, it was a subject on the radio here this morning. How much student debt do you have as you're graduating? And people are telling these, you know, this is terrible. Whereas in Finland, the government views education as an investment in the people. And that actually makes sense because it is. Another huge difference in education between America and Finland is exactly the kind of apprenticeship thinking that Manish was talking about. Here in America, education is very much isolated unto itself. And it is kind of, I mean, I went to Yale for graduate school. The things that I learned in graduate school don't matter nearly as much as me being able to say I went to Yale. You know, Manish, what you said is exactly correct. But in Finland, they focus on education as actually a means of contributing to society. And so that means that business and education are integrated from high school onwards. Even as a high schooler, you as a Finnish student, you do internship time with a company. And so you start to see from very beginning what your education will be for. And that helps you as a person understand really where you might need to, what, you know, where you need to focus and what's going to work for you. And so anyway, it's you know, we can't wave a magic wand and change all of India at once, but if you need to look for models, look at Finland. So, but then now shifting to the technology question that you just asked me, one of the really the significant changes to education that's coming up from the technologies that I'm seeing is the rise of virtual reality. And virtual reality is spectacular for education for several reasons. First of all, if you are training somebody to do something that is difficult, dangerous, or if the training is very expensive, it is much easier to create a digital simulation of whatever the situation is, and then have somebody, you know, see it and experience it in virtual reality, moving their body through whatever the situation is. And that's clear, that's easily understandable. But what may not be so immediately apparent with virtual reality training is that you can measure everything that the person does. I was doing a demo of, it was this industrial training where you're figuring out, when you're learning how to transfer oil flows at a refinery from one tank to another. And you have to make sure that you do this valve before this valve and that valve and that valve and so on and so forth. And the thing is that as you're doing the virtual reality training, it measures exactly what you do and exactly when you do it. And so at the end, you can actually see, it's not just the result. Did the oil make it into the final tank, which is what you might get in a regular training program. You can see, oh, there was an 18-second hesitation between turning this valve and turning that valve. And that means that the person had to stop and think about it. And maybe they should not yet be certified because they don't really have this down yet. So you can get extremely granular with understanding the actual level of the skill in this kind of a digital simulation area, which means you can truly understand whether a person does have the skill. And but the drawback right now with these kind of virtually simulated worlds for training is that they are not recognized by certification boards. At the beginning of COVID, getting more lab technicians was really important as the whole world was ramping up COVID testing, for example. And there's a Danish company that does lab training in virtual reality. And when students come out of that, they have not actually been in a lab, but they have learned all of the skills. And the problem was that this company could not actually get the people who had learned the virtual reality training, they couldn't get them certified because the certification boards didn't recognize digital training as being equivalent to the actual handling of test tubes in an actual lab. And so that's something that we as an entire world really need to get the certification boards globally of all kinds of things to actually recognize that digital training studies have shown that it is valid, and in many ways it's actually better than hands-on training in the physical world.
Right. And I think that kind of connects back with the point, Manish, you spoke about, which is on-site training is equal to classroom training is equal to on-the-job training. Unless the certification of these are equalized, why would people even choose those pathways, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So Manish, I was actually reading the latest report, which was released by TeamLease. This was on the current jobs trends. And I'll just quote some of the hottest jobs which were included there. Field scientists, EV technical experts, digital marketing managers, KYC analysts, food technologists, curriculum developers, and SaaS ops engineers. These were some which I picked up in the report. And there could be other such specialized or niche skills which are emerging. So my question, Manish, is, there are many people who have joined and many questions we received from people who are either graduating now or they are mid-career professionals who might be transitioning. So as they prepare for this, kind of job change or career shifts, how should they look at which ones are like immediate fads and which ones, would really help them look at sustained careers?
I mean, I would be careful with the disease that historians warn again called presentism, right? The weather of the moment is not on what careers are built, right? We have to think a little longer than the next quarter or the next year, which our report sort of covered. I think these kind of reports which we put out are based on employer surveys, so they give people a sense of the temperature. But I mean, sometimes you'll confuse a passing shower with the climate change, or you'll confuse climate change with a passing shower, right? So I would be careful with extrapolating the weather of the moment to the future. And you can't predict the future. I think I have read the 50 reports of every country in the world which tried to predict where jobs would be in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. They have the efficacy of palm reading or astrology, right? So I think that just because you can't predict the future doesn't mean you can't prepare for it. And I would take a longer view of the skill sets that are going to be valued. Where is the wage premium moving? The wage premium is moving to soft skills. The wage premium is moving away from technical problems, and wicked problems, right? Technical problems, the rules stay the same, the players stay the same, and the goal stays the same. In wicked problems, the rules keep changing, the players keep changing, and the goal keeps changing. And I think that, so all of us have to really plan for lifelong learning. Our parents had 35-year careers, we'll have 45-year careers, our kids will have 55-year careers. And so you can't live off the 15 years or 18 years of that you have up front. So I would say the most important thing people need to develop is a personal learning plan. I would just submit that in a world where Google knows everything, knowing is useless. Learning how to learn is really the key skill set. So I would say that people who are looking for weather of the moment job changes can obviously refer to a number of reports on, the hiring outlook in the next 6 months or 1 year. But in India, if you were to say in the next 5-10 years, I would say sales, customer service, logistics, and technology would probably be the largest sources of demand. I mean, we're still going to see whether we get our act together in manufacturing with the China plus one strategy, but manufacturing is only 11% of employment, right? But I think sales, customer service, logistics, and technology would be the largest sources of demand. So if people want to prepare for those, they can think about that. But I would say don't focus on the 4 areas, focus on the soft skills, which are really valuable, focus on the hard skills, which are really valuable, get into the workforce, get into a company with signaling value, get into apprenticeship programs with signaling value, get yourself mentors. I mean, I've read a book a week for 25 years, start doing that. I mean, there could be all kinds of very specific next steps, but instead of trying to predict the future, you should prepare for the future would be my advice.
Great. No, that's really good advice, Manish. And I think, as you mentioned, preparing means, we probably will look more beyond immediate jobs and look at the underlying skills, which is the entire reason, we are doing this talk as well, because too much noise is around the jobs versus the skills which we need to develop. And that brings me back to you, Leslie. When you look at these underlying skills, you've kind of talked about this AI-powered automation, which people, are scared about. The way to counter that is to kind of develop deep problem solving, computational problem solving kind of skills. So would you kind of take some examples for us and share how this could play out in some of these most impactful jobs, which you see maybe not 10 years down the line, but in the next few years?
Yeah, actually, I would push back a little bit on how you phrase that, because deep problem solving, that kind of sounds like heavy mathematics and algorithms and stuff, and it doesn't have to be that complicated. It's if we take a lesson from technology itself, technology only gets successful and it only takes off when it solves a problem. And the same is true of people and jobs. The jobs that solve problems are the ones that are actually going to have staying power and actually are going to be the interesting jobs. And, again, kind of going off of Manish's lifelong learning theme there. I'm a technology trend scout in Silicon Valley. My degree is in the history of art. I created my job myself because I saw a problem that needed to be solved. I did exactly what Manish said. I got into a company that was creating value, Nokia. I've been with Nokia for 22 years. And while I was within Nokia and I was doing something, one quick word about the history of art. When you're learning about the history of art, yes, you learn about artists and dates and paintings and so on, but what you learn is how to analyze in a non-linear way. And that's the core skill that I have taken with me for the rest of my life that has enabled my entire working career. So it's not about the topic so much about the skills and the way of thinking. And so that kind of ability to take disparate things and put them together and understand how, this might integrate into something new in a very abstract way. That is something that humans can do and computers cannot. And so for me, as I said, I got that from studying the history of art. But now moving forward, I was at Nokia and I happened to come out here to Silicon Valley after being based in Finland for a long time. And I was doing another job, but I looked around and I thought, wait a second, there's a lot of technical innovation happening here that my industry, the telecommunications industry, is not aware of. And that's a problem. So, okay, well, let me fix that. And so I just started reporting on what I was seeing in addition to the job that I was, my official job that I was already doing. And over time, this reporting on what I was seeing became of higher value, both to our customers and to Nokia itself. And then that became my full-time job. So I created my own job, and it's something that I love to do, by seeing a problem and solving it. And so it's that ability to think creatively and not accept the status quo. And because there's a lot of problems that we take for granted and that we just accept all the time. The people who spot the problems and then apply their skills that they developed in whatever field to then find solutions to those problems and in working with other people, those are going to be, and I know I'm speaking very vaguely here, but it's a mindset that you can actually carry into many different kinds of jobs, many different kinds of industries, but always having the learning mindset and always having the problem solving mindset. Those are the people that are going to really love their jobs and actually be very secure in them, because companies will find them to be extremely valuable people.
Great, great. I actually had a quick rapid fire and you touched upon the first question, Leslie. So I wanted to ask both of you, just like Leslie mentioned that, kind of creating your own job, right? Versus imagine in 2030, people actually still having that one job which defines their work, defines their life. So how real is that versus, being able to create jobs and create careers, which can maybe not be linear, but it could be connecting the dots from multiple different pieces of work. So what is your take on that, Manish and Leslie?
Yeah, well, yeah, just to follow on from what I was just saying, if you focus on solving a problem, that is the thing that actually is the linchpin for creating your own job. And it can be a problem within your own company, or even better, a problem that your customers have. And if it's a problem that your customers have, then that is actually a way of creating new value for your company. And that's actually a very strong path to career success. But it can't be just doing what you want to do. It has to solve a problem, but quite often it can be a problem that other people haven't even perceived to be a problem, and that's what I mean by not accepting the status quo. So yeah, otherwise I'll just be repeating what I just said. So.
Great, great.
Yeah, I think the one job is a bit of a challenge, but let's not throw away the benefits of specialization, right? You don't want the cabin crew to be flying the plane, right? There are benefits of specialization. You want some people will be an inch wide, mile deep, and some people will be a mile wide, inch deep, because the Germans have a wonderful word, Fingerutspel. You develop intuition in your fingers after doing something for 15, 20 years. And I recognize a lot of people who may have had one job, but are more than just technical skills, right? So I think it's better to think of life as a marathon. One of my favorite marathoners, Eliud Kipchoge, the Kenyan, he's the only human to have run a marathon in less than 2 hours. He says you run the first half of the marathon on your legs and the second half on your mind. And I think that's how we need to think about our careers. We run the first half of our career solving technical problems, working hard, we're running on our legs. And the second half is on our minds, and which is really working smart. It's about creativity, it is about curiosity. And so I would just say that plan to have the second half of your career different from your first half, but that doesn't mean you switch from being a pilot to a policeman. It might just be doing different things in the same thing.
Correct. No, that's really, really important. I think for many of us who are planning for, like you mentioned, maybe 50 years of work and not just 20 years and 30 years of work, going forward. And Manish, I just want to round this up before we get to audience questions. You alluded to wicked problems. So if you could just give us a sense of, what you define as wicked problems, because even Leslie spoke about problem solving for customers being a very important component.
I mean, strategy is a wicked problem. Governance is a wicked problem. Teaching is a wicked problem. Every child is different. Sales is a wicked problem. Every customer is different. So I would say if you were to think about the three professions that humans have an unfair advantage over algorithms, they would be sales, they would be teaching, and they would be leadership or governance. So I think that the more you think about, as Wesley said, if you can make it a rule, then you don't have an unfair advantage. But if the logic is fuzzy, if there's reflexivity, if the question changes the answer, if there is probability, then you suddenly have an unfair advantage. So I think we humans should not be competing with machines. I don't think automation is going to destroy the jobs in the world. It's just going to make us more productive.
Correct. Exactly. And I think it's been happening since generations. I think every generation probably asks itself this question. So with that, maybe, I would like to spend 15 minutes going through some of the audience questions. We have some very interesting questions. So let me open it up for that. We have a question from Dhananjay, and he's asking what is in store for the banking industry, which is, kind of been isolated for a long time, he feels, but also created some of the biggest jobs or most jobs. So this is open to either of you or both of you who want to answer.
Leslie?
Yeah, this one. Now, I don't actually spend much time in the finance world, and I'm certainly not an expert on banking, but what I said about rules-based things, banking very much falls into that kind of a category. So I'm not seeing that from my perspective as a growth industry. Finance is different, finance is separate, but banking itself, I really see the machines taking that one over.
I think the boundaries between banks, non-banks, and fintech companies are blurring. I think that originally we thought fintech companies would destroy banks. I think banks are partnering with fintech companies because you need to be regulated entities. So I think you have to not look at banking, you have to look at financial services, which is why in India we've switched to BFSI, banking, financial services, and insurance. And that will be a growth area. And particularly in India, credit to GDP ratio is just 50%. Insurance is highly underpenetrated. And we have a wonderful public good in UPI, right, which is a national financial payment switch, which is free. So I think there's a lot of innovation going on. There'll be a lot of job creation in financial services. Now, whether banks or fintech or non-banks will be winners or losers in this, it's why do you care? In the war, the arms manufacturer always makes money.
It's well, and Manish, that's a really good point, and I want to highlight that again and again all through the discussion here, all of the things that we're highlighting are the human things, the things that will be difficult for, so doing the accounting, doing the the absolute grunt work. Yes, machines. In fact, machines have already taken over most of that. But the fine thinking, the creativity, that is definitely where humans will always be playing.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much for that answer. That really helps. And I think it also probably was Bill Gates who mentioned that banking is necessary, but banks are not. So we're probably coming to that juncture sooner than later. There's a question from two people, Dinakar and Yash, and they are kind of asking about two things. One is how important are exam marks going to be for jobs going forward? And also, what are the common non-IT skills which the jobs would demand? I think we have answered the second part. Maybe the first part, Manish, if you want to share, you spoke about school more than skilling, but how important would exam marks remain for the jobs which we are staring at?
See, I mean, I don't think academics has anything to do with life success, but the problem we have is employers lazily use academics as filtering tools. And I think they are imperfect tools, but they're not useless tools, right? Every model is incomplete. Some models are useful, right? So any exam model is a metric. It's not the goal. So I think that, how assessment is done will change in the future. Many of us are frustrated with, we want to move to continuous assessments in schools rather than the single end of board exams. Anyway, NEP already proposes a change for moving away from the big board exam to continuous assessments. But there will have to be some signaling value. Now, you can create signaling value through your career. You can create signaling value through your exams. You can create signaling value through your work. You can create signaling value through your mentors. I mean, I think what you should focus on is how do you make yourself strong and how do you let the world know you're strong. And I think people tend to focus on how do I let the world know I'm strong, but fundamentally you have to be strong, right? One of my favorite Hindi poets is Ramdari Singh Dinkar. He says, Shama Shobhati us bhujang ko jiske paas garal ho. Only snakes with venom can be kind, benevolent, and generous. I mean, only the powerful can be generous. And so I think let's focus on being strong. I think the word gets out there with people who are strong and good.
Right. I think there is a very interesting question. So Manish, you spoke about this. You spoke about the second half of your career, maybe requiring more creativity. So there is a question coming from Lake, and he's asking what are the skills required for individuals who are looking at second jobs post-retirement?
I don't think there are new skills required post-retirement. I just think you have to find people who are willing to use the skills which you have already developed. I mean, I think that the matching problem is different from a mismatch problem, which is different from a repair problem, which is different from a prepare problem. In retirement, I think it's a matching problem. I think that most people at that age have developed the cognitive skills or the maturity for wicked problems, but you always don't find the right opportunities. So I think that and in a country like India, where 65% of our people are less than 35 years old, it's a little different in thinking about retirement skills than say in Italy or in Europe or other places where they're aging and their workforces are dwindling and they need to figure out how to extend retirement ages. So maybe Leslie can answer the question on how to think about a post-retirement career, because right now I'm trying to get people in diapers recruited.
Yeah, I think as you do get older, you do have that experience and knowledge that you certainly did not have on day one of your career. And what you said about needing to find the opportunity to match that is exactly the challenge that arises. And the best way to prepare for that over the course of your preceding career is really to network as much as possible. Meet people from all kinds of disciplines. Go to conference, expose yourself to things that are outside whatever it is that your individual job is. Keep having a wide exposure, both in terms of topics and of people. And that maximizes your surface area, as it were, to be able to then find that match for something that your expertise will be good for later in your life.
Maximize your surface area. I think that's an interesting takeaway, I think. Yeah. So there are two more questions which I think would be very interesting to take. There are many questions coming up. I wish we could answer all of them. So there is Ankush Agarwal who is asking about ethics. So he's saying we need ethical and honesty skills in the future due to degradation of values day by day. And how do we project job ethics and professional ethics, say in 2030? Again, I think maybe it'll be good to hear from both of you on this.
I don't think ethics are declining. In 200 BC in one of the pyramids and many ancient structures have it written there, this generation of children doesn't listen to their parents and will destroy the world. So I would be a little careful with presentism. I think ethics are table stakes. They are, people who don't have ethics in the long run don't really get ahead. At least they get ahead in one innings or two innings. But if your life is a multiple innings game, it's a marathon. So I wouldn't say that. I think ethics is par for the course. It should be taken as hygiene, and I think it is. I don't think the number of corrupt people or unethical people as a percentage of the global population has changed since, of course, not since Indira Gandhi was there, but since Akbar was there, or since maybe even when Caesar was there.
Yeah, from my point of view, Nokia is actually routinely included among the most ethical companies in the world, and I'm actually very proud to work for a company where ethics are actually front and center, and it's a differentiator for us, because so it means that sometimes we lose contracts because we are not willing to pay the bribes, but other times when those bribe payers are caught and then banished from the markets, we're the ones who are left standing, and we're the ones who long-term do get the business. And so that's kind of the model on a corporate level, and then taking that down to an individual level. I agree with what Manish said. Ethics are absolutely critical. If you want to get ahead in the long term, being ethical and showing yourself to be ethical is the better way to go, no question, because the unethical it might look like an attractive shortcut, but you will fall off the tree or be plucked off the tree by those who are looking at such things. And what I think is going to be really interesting to watch, though, is our ethics and technology. How is that intersection going to happen? And that's something that's just a giant question mark for me. If we do have technology moving into more algorithmic kinds of things, does that mean that our ethics will be evaluated the same way a lot of other metrics about ourselves are evaluated? I don't know, but I think that's an intriguing possibility.
Right. No, that's so important. As you mentioned, it's table stakes. And I think in our report, we also analyzed the same question from the point of view of the machines, right? Ethics and inclusivity in technology. I think that's again a question that is emerging more, and we have analyzed that in our report. Last question probably on Deepak. I think this could be a very quick question. I think Deepak is agreeing with your Manish on the college signaling value, and he's saying that companies like Google and Apple are now becoming more comfortable hiring people from outside traditional college system as long as they have the right skilling on certification. So, I think the question probably he's trying to ask is, would more companies follow this kind of method, and would that kind of open up with NEP, etc., which are being planned at least in India and even globally?
I think so. I mean, it's how quickly we broaden our assessment process, right? In terms of continuous assessment, in terms of different assessments. See, colleges like IITs and IIMs have tight entry gates and wide open exit gates. Chartered accountant exam has wide open entry gate and tight exit gate. Vocational training traditionally had wide open entry gate and wide open exit gate, so it didn't have signaling value. But this tension will always be there, right? There was a great book in the 1960s by a US Education Secretary called Gordon Gardner, who's asked ourselves, can we be equal and excellent?
Yeah.
Right? We want to be equal in a democracy, but we also want to be excellent. So this is a tension in a democracy which will always stay, because you want everybody to have equality of opportunity, but you don't want equality of outcomes. But we get frustrated with the lack of equality of opportunity. So I think many more companies are broadening. Even the IT supply chain in India is now 10-15% non-engineering graduates, right? So who are being hired even by our software companies, because so much is going into design, so much is going into other areas. So I think it's a natural process, but for employers who, it's like the civil service exam in India, right? It's not a selection exam, it's an elimination exam, because 10 million people apply for 3,000 positions. We're not trying to hire people, we're trying to eliminate people with an honest and objective process. So I think that for countries like India, where you will have 500 times more applicants, you will always try and find some objective criteria, right? But yes, I think there will be more opportunities for people who are non-graduates for non-schools, but it's quite a big social change also, right? I mean, vocational training is usually for other people's children. It's not for our children. When we give advice, at least. And so I think that's changing, but it still hasn't changed yet.
Great. Any last closing thoughts, Leslie, before we close the session?
Yeah, I mean, I wonder about the effects of COVID and in our lockdown time on things like the assessments. California, the state of California, for example, they are not considering this year. They are not considering the College Board exam grades in college admissions, because the feeling is just that, well, school was disrupted so much that these scores are not actually going to be a good value of the measure of the students, and so they're going to be looking much more at the quality of the essays and to some extent the grades of the students, but much more on their actually ability to present themselves in writing. And I don't know if that kind of thing is going to last, and if that's going to spread into employment thinking. But again, we go back, this is kind of the moving away from a mechanistic way of evaluating people and moving into the human qualities, and wanting to pick the people who can think and who can articulate their thoughts and make other people understand those thoughts. That's actually the thing that's going to be very hard to replicate. And if you're good at that, then the machines will never come for your jobs.
Right. No, this has been a fascinating discussion. We are at the hour. So thank you so much, Leslie. And thank you so much, Manish, for taking the time to join us from such different locations, from Silicon Valley, from Srinagar, and of course, I'm in Bangalore. And my key learning from the session is school matters more than skill. We should double down more on being human and have the intelligence which is conversational, political, and strategic. And I think the last one, I think, Manish, which you mentioned, and that will stay with me, is soft skills are caught and not taught. I think that's it from us at ET Prime Talk, and see you soon for the next Prime Talk. Thank you so much, everyone who joined in.